Once you realize the power of home automation, you realize how powerful it can be for time savings in your day-to-day life. What's up, everyone? Aron here, Editor-in-Chief of ASE Labs. In this episode, I want to take you through my current smart home setup, what I'm running, what's worked, and what hasn't worked. Then we'll walk through some recommendations based on your technical comfort level. The smart home world in 2025 has matured in some ways, but it's still very confusing if you're just getting into it. I'm going to be breaking down the recommendations into three distinct categories. First is for those hardcore techies, like myself, who want total control over everything and don't mind tinkering and spending lots of time to get things perfectly right. The second is for those tech-savvy people that really just want to buy something and it should work pretty much on the first go-around with some minor tweaking here and there. And third, it's for everybody else, the general purpose use, the plug and play, the ease of use. Basically, you buy it, not having to worry about complicated setups or anything. Before we get into the recommendations, let me describe my current smart home setup. Right now, my smart home is powered by a zigbee network. And at the heart of it all, or I guess you could say the brain of it all, is a Habitat elevation hub. If you're not familiar with Habitat, think of it as a privacy-first, local control, no cloud, no internet required alternative to more mainstream hubs, like those from Google, Amazon, and Apple. The biggest draw for me, everything runs locally. That means no cloud delays, no outages when the internet goes down, and no data being sent to third-party servers. And I'll add one more. You aren't reliant on those third-party servers staying up for you to control your smart home. Zigbee, the protocol I use, is a low-power mesh networking technology. It works best when you have lots and lots of powered Zigbee devices to make the network mesh strong. Those devices include in-wall switches, smart plugs like this, anything that's basically taking main power. Things that are battery operated actually bolt on to the mesh network. They don't repeat, but all those devices that are actually powered will help strengthen the network, and the end devices, like those battery-powered devices, will actually be able to communicate a lot easier when there's a strong mesh network. I've automated many things in my house, and I'm sure there's a lot more things I can automate. And if you have some ideas, leave me some feedback because I'd love to hear what your automations are. Things like motion-based lighting, time-based scenes, button controllers, and much more. I even ran a grow tent over winter for tropical plants that actually used the Habitat and Zigbee to switch on and off lights and fans specifically for exhaust and intake based on the temperature and humidity, and it all worked fine. Right now I have about 30 devices on my Zigbee network. I've never had any interference issues or real mesh issues. However, I've had single devices go bad, but not take down the entire network. Compatibility is mostly good. In certain cases, a different driver or specific type of setup is actually needed to unlock the full device capabilities. It's not always plug and play. Sometimes a device will work, but only the basics will actually be supported. Think of a switch that can only turn on and off rather than being able to send button controls. Now that might be the switch itself, if you think of like GE or Ultra Pro Zigbee switches, or it might be the driver like on cheaper switches like this thing right here. However, even with all the caveats, I love it. I love home automation. I love being able to do things automatically. My entire house is automated. When I go upstairs to sleep, I hold down on my smart switch and all the lights downstairs turn off. And even if they didn't do that, there's an actual routine that I set to make sure that all the lights will eventually turn off at certain times at night. Home automation should save you time and effort, and that's what the value of home automation is. It's not to do things that are necessarily fancy, it's to do things that you don't notice that are tedious and monotonous. Once you realize the power of home automation, you realize how powerful it can be for time savings in your day-to-day life. But I'm not going to say there's not a trade-off here. Habitat isn't the most user-friendly out of the box. You may need to install custom drivers to unlock that full potential. I'm looking at you, Innovelli Switches. You might need to read a lot of documentation and spend some time getting it all to run. For me, the payoff is total control and lightning fast automations. There are also benefits to buying a working product rather than building something from scratch a la Home Assistant, but that's not for everybody. Now let's take a step back and talk about the bigger picture. I have an entire episode specifically focused on the mid-2025 smart home environment. You can check the description for a link to that episode. Let's focus on 3 different protocols or technologies to know for this discussion: Zigbee, Thread, and Matter. And why Matter matters. Let's go through them. Zigbee has been around for a while. It's mature, it's fast, it's supported by tons of devices. It's a mesh network, so devices can talk to each other to extend that network's reach. But Zigbee requires a hub, like Habitat. While most devices might work well together, you might run into some compatibility issues like I detailed in my smart home earlier. Let's talk about Thread. Thread is the newest smart home standard in terms of networking technology. It is a giant leap forward. It actually builds off of Zigbee. In fact, it uses the same IEEE standard. Thread is also a mesh network. It's very, very different than Zigbee though. Thread is built to talk IP, specifically IPv6. That means it speaks the same language as your home Wi-Fi network and the entire internet. That upshot means that it can actually smoothly integrate with current, existing, and future networks. It's fast, reliable, self-healing, low power, absolutely perfect for smart homes. And, very importantly, it's getting widespread support from folks like Apple, Google, Amazon, and many others. Now let's shift our focus to Matter, and we're going to discuss why Matter matters. Matter is a big unifier. It's not a networking protocol like Zigbee or Thread. It's a language that runs on top of Internet Protocol. It's what allows a smart device from one brand to work with an app or a hub or another device from a different brand. Matter runs on top of IP, which means networks like Thread, Wi-Fi, or even Ethernet. Matter is supported out of the box right now from devices like the Amazon Alexa, the Google Nest products, and Apple HomePods. Matter is meant to end the "will this work with that" once and for all. We'll see about that. So, with all that in mind, what should you consider using? It depends on how much effort you're willing to put in. To be honest, the first thing you should consider is the type of controller or hub you want to use. Then you figure out what the best networking technology that device will support. I'll detail this with 3 scenarios. The first scenario, hardcore tech users. If you love tinkering, self-hosting, maybe some command line operations, this setup is for you. Let me introduce you to Home Assistant. This will be my next build whenever I move. Home Assistant is incredibly powerful. It's open source, it's free, it runs on tons of things, and supports almost everything. And now, it has great support for Matter and Thread. Home Assistant is software, but you can buy devices that have it ready to go, like Home Assistant Green. Ready to go doesn't exactly mean that, because there's far more setup that you're going to need to do even if you buy something like a Home Assistant Green, like actually buying the actual radios for your network. However, like Habitat, you can build custom dashboards, write complex automations, and control everything locally. You can easily add Zigbee or Z-Wave using USB sticks if you have a legacy network. Thread will also require a Thread border router, or you can actually use a USB stick for that as well. But be prepared to spend time maintaining that. If you love that, it's a dream setup. As a technophile, this is going to be the target for my next build. Home Assistant using Matter over Thread. I can even bridge any of the Zigbee devices that I have if I wanted to bring them over. Let's talk about the second option. You're tech savvy, but you're also time conscious. If you want something powerful, but not overly complicated, this might be for you. My suggestion is to use Habitat as your hub. It's a physical device you actually buy. The UI and UX of the software takes some getting used to. It's a little clunky, but I've seen improvements ever since I purchased it back in 2023. Habitat gives you advanced automation options, it runs locally, and doesn't require a cloud connection. In my opinion, it's easier to set up than Home Assistant, and it still gives you real control over your entire system. However, it is not open source, and there are still more complexities that make it less plug and play. If you're running Habitat, you should choose Zigbee or Thread for your networking technology. The reason I still say Zigbee for Habitat is due to the lack of a Thread radio on the Habitat product itself. That means you'll need a Thread border router, which is not a big deal, but once Habitat actually builds in a Thread radio, which I'm sure is just around the corner, my recommendation would change to going all in on Thread. Matter support on Habitat is also sort of a work in progress. The Habitat documentation even recommends provisioning devices on another Matter controller, then pairing it to the Habitat. All that to say that Zigbee is still a solid option for habitat. I'm using it on my network and it's solid. If you want a mix of power and usability, this is a good choice for you. Let's talk about the third option, the plug and play, the I just want this to work without having to worry about anything. If you want things to work without much hassle, but are willing to have some compromises, here's what to do. Buy Matter compatible devices, period. Do not accept products that aren't Matter capable. Use Thread or Wi-Fi depending on the product. Get yourself a Matter controller like a Google Nest product, an Amazon Alexa, or an Apple HomePod. These controllers also act as a Thread border router, so setup is fast and easy. You just scan a QR code and it's connected. By the way, you don't necessarily need one of those hubs, but they have Thread border routers built in, so they are very, very useful. You can control a Matter smart home through your smartphone. No hub actually needed. No drivers, no custom firmware. This is the most plug-and-play setup, and honestly, it's getting pretty good. Matter devices have local control. That's how Matter was built. But who knows if those hubs still phone home all the time, right? Still, Matter is the way to go if you want true plug-and-play. And those home hubs support Matter and Thread right out of the box these days. It could be the gateway to more complex and localized control using Habitat or Home Assistant later. So what have I learned after all this time in smart home land? 1. Local control is required. Period. 2. No internet required. If it needs the internet, it is not for me. 3. This is more of a personal caveat of mine, not necessarily something I'd recommend. I'm not a fan of Wi-Fi devices, especially for things that require home automation. Wi-Fi just isn't stable enough for me. I would not use Wi-Fi in switches or outlets. For things like cameras and such, absolutely no problem because they're high bandwidth. Compared to my Zigbee network, Wi-Fi is way less stable. And I'll give you a fourth. Matter is the future, but it's still catching up. That said, it's really starting to make good on the promise of interoperability. If I were building from scratch today, I would go all in on Matter over Thread and building a Home Assistant server. What you choose depends on how much time and technological knowledge you actually have. They're simple and complex options, but Matter is really the thing to build for in most cases. The smart home is finally maturing. Still a little awkward though, but it's way more accessible than even a couple of years ago. That about wraps up this episode. Do you have your own smart home setup? If so, what technologies do you use? Are you all in on Z-Wave? Do you zip around on Zigbee? Or are you threading the needle along with Matter? What controllers do you use? Leave a comment, send a message, or reach out via carrier pigeon. The choice is yours. And remember to hit that subscribe button. There's more interesting content in the pipeline. Have a topic that you want covered? Drop me a line. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you in the next one.